Welcome to this James School of Genesis video. This is an introduction to the philosophy of Genesis. The implications of this paper ought to be huge, meaning prove that Genesis is the truth and that thesis or theory is not the truth. The definition of theory implies no truth whatsoever. The truth of reality lies in the faculties of our existence. What will be true and certain and definitely not theory is that which is completely true. Thus, a complete understanding of our faculties will reveal truths. We call this empiricism in philosophy. Rationality is reducible to an idea. An idea is created by ignoring our faculties and extracting upon the foundation of our existence. Rationality creates an external base by which we theoretically exist, for example, a physical universe as opposed to a natural universe. Science is not empirical in any way. We call empirical science fact-based philosophy. Genesis is thus the complete truth, and only in empirical philosophy can we actually understand the truth. The philosophy of Genesis is in contrast and in opposition to theory or thesis. The exploration of this paper is to identify the difference between thesis and Genesis, and what foundation of existence applies to both. Prove that only empiricism can reveal truth when compared to rationality, and that the natural universe is the actual universe when compared to the physical universe and its paradigm. And finally, how does all of this implicate the world, or rather, affect the world? Thesis, as stated, is a belief or something in something you believe. Rather, it's a belief in something you think you know, meaning you don't actually know what you believe. Theses can only believe. Existence is defined as a being that also exists by factual basis, but knows of their basis, meaning one can actually understand their own reality. That is what makes a being. Thesis does not exist as a theory when defined or when defined as a proposed explanation. It only can be a theory when defined as a proposed exploration. So the difference between explanation and exploration is that an explanation would actually identify what is going on, whereas exploration would perhaps abstract upon the explanation and create its own reality. For this, we call it opinion. Often, philosophy is known as being your opinion, but we know that philosophy is not your opinion. Philosophy is about fact-based statements that you can make about reality. Theory, or thesis, in this case science, is about what we can explore, ideas. Often it's construed as the opposite. Philosophy is seen as the theorizing, and science is seen as the genesis. Well, if science believes that you're just an animal that dies, and that's the end of your life, then that's a theory, and we will be able to prove the difference. So we know that the nature of science is not Genesis, but really is theory. So, where it is proposed exploration theory, for this we know that the commonly held knowledge that we bring that which is no truth into fact by theorizing, this process is delusional and backwards. A theory of something would only create a concept based on already established facts. A theory is fact dependent. I classify 4 kinds of theory. First, we will explore theory concept, theory fact, God theory, and mixed theory. Theory concept qualifies as impossible, as the invisible maintains its nothingness, and thus never can such a theory be possible. Because theory concept is this notion that through the invisible, we can bring something into the visible. So we can literally bring new colors into existence. We know this is impossible because it's not something that's ever happened. One. Number two, based on the notion that empirically we are based on a foundation, out of that foundation comes all other colors. And out of all of these colors, there are an exact amount based upon the foundation, which is 22. If you are going to imagine what invisibility is in terms of color, if that qualifies as something you would see or not see, but still something considerably sight relative, then the invisible, which is concept, is that which is the opposite of color. Knowing the nature of opposition means we understand that concept, or theory concept, is that which where we theorize through the invisible and try to bring that into the visible. This is impossible. Therefore, the class of theory we will deconstruct is only that which is based on fact, not concept. Theory is now dependent upon fact. Fact is not theory, and the good nature of theory, which is creating new, is now based on an already established fact. The third class of theory is God theory. This is that which is based upon the unknown, which is in accordance with the already established fact. The theory fact cannot exist, as the potential to create new is not new, but rather neo. Neo because we utilize our God-given foundation of our faculties of existence to create a secondary foundation. So, theory fact is that based upon already established facts, we can theorize. The problem with that is that we would be bringing something new into existence. When I've explained that you cannot really bring something new, but rather neo. So out of the already established facts of our faculties of existence, we can create more. Which is the combination of, for example, which I'll get into, which is smell and taste, which creates flavor. So theory fact is somewhat disqualified at this point, and we'll be able to completely disqualify it as we go on. The God theory is now the only possible theory. However, are we God? Can we truly create? The answer is that we cannot create, but rather combine the faculties of our existence, such as taste and smell. We can taste something based on smelling. We call this flavor. A flavor is thus being created by combining already established facts of our faculties. God theory is thus disqualified, and God theory is a little more than what fact is. It's not just establishing something new, it's establishing something entirely new, a separate foundation. Can we create beings ourselves? Well, the reality that on earth that we are parents to children and that we've created them is highly delusional. It is not the case whatsoever. So that is where God theory comes into play, and that is exactly what is being explored in the mind and in the idea of the rational scientific mind, is that they are literally parents to these children. This is highly delusional. Now leaving a fourth. Mixed theory can qualify as something real, however the terminology states that I have found a way to create and only through an already established foundation. That foundation is fact via Genesis, not theory. Thus, mixed theory really means Genesis. Making two terms redundant, I leave you with the choice: continue to be delusional and theorize the possibility of the word theory, or know with certainty that theory does not exist. The word theory should be defined as a combination of possible uses, all which qualify as incoherent and delusional because they do not create fact-based production. Genesis is defined as creation, origin, and beginning. By this definition, we know Genesis must mean the ability to produce. To produce facts out of the origin of our existence, the origin of our existence and what qualifies as fact is based upon a being existing. The theory that we will die becomes impossible and should be viewed as highly incoherent. Something I will discuss later in this paper, yet I mention now. The existing being whom can read and comprehend this paper, when compared to atoms and the Almighty Son, which have no faculties by which they can respond to the fact that they are not beings. We can ask an atom, and I will right now, do you exist? I get no response. Therefore, atoms do not exist. Meaning, not that atoms do not exist in the sense that atoms may be there creating the physical, but the terminology which I've just expressed, which is creating the physical, isn't quite accurate. It's that the creator, the creation being, is changing and morphing the reality around them. And atoms was something Genesis out of the foundation as a possible reasoning to physicality. But never was it the creation process. The physical, however, is also an idea and something rational. And in a way, you could say that atoms may exist which help create the parts of the body, which is the bones and the skin and everything that we have in our body. But physicality is an idea, it's not something real. Often physicality is explained as touch. Like touch, that's physical, right? No, that's touch. That's not physical. There's really no way to find physicality. It doesn't exist, and it never will exist. The nature of a physical universe, which I'm getting ahead here, is that which is decaying and being destroyed, and there is no reality where that is real when you exist as something. So, a being, going back, the existing being who can read and comprehend this paper, when compared to atoms and the Almighty Son, which have no faculties by which they can respond to the fact that they are not beings. However, I'm aware of only one group of beings, we call this humanity, and they can respond to the fact that they are beings. Genesis, which only applies to existing beings, humans, I call internal Genesis. And all the world which is made out of some foundation, yet has no ability to produce facts about itself, I call the external Genesis. Internal Genesis is that which applies to a being who can realize they exist and state facts about their existence. External Genesis applies to life which mimics a being yet cannot express its own existence. Genesis is now defined as the foundation of humans. A philosophy of Genesis is like saying, what facts can a being produce about themselves and the external world? So in a summary, philosophy of Genesis is the following. A philosophy of Genesis is like saying, what facts can a being produce about themselves and the external world? Philosophy is stating facts. Genesis is existence. Archetypal, existential, something like that. Combining the two is philosophy of Genesis, meaning facts that an existing being, or the facts about existence, specifically to beings who can produce those facts about the internal and external world. Now we ought to explain the foundation and faculties in questions. The faculty proves Genesis. Factually proves Genesis. So now we ought to explicate the foundation and faculties in question that factually prove Genesis. Sorry about that. Foundation of a being, Genesis. So there are 22 or 23, because you don't count 0, so 22. There is archetypes. existential, logic, wisdom, knowing, memory, imagination, intuition, psyche, mind, feelings, colors, sound, smell, taste, shape, movement, elements, chemicals, vitamins, energy, body, and number. All of which, in and of themselves, are the foundation of a being who exists. The opposite of that is a foundation that is established which decays. This is the philosophy of science, or rather, science. This foundation is the basis of Genesis, both internal and external. However, the distinction in the ability to existentialize or archetype, the distinction in the ability to archetype or objectify is the difference between Genesis and thesis. So, really, you can reduce archetype to subjectivity and objectivity. One is objectivity, one is subjectivity. We can clearly understand that if there's subjectivity, then there is a self. If there's objectivity, there is no self. So, life which is external is objected out of the internal. An objection is merely a copy of the being. The external world mimics the internal. We now have an actual understanding of the realities of Genesis and theses, but what implications to science and philosophy does this have? Empiricism is defined as you see what you get, not you see what you experience, as a rationalist would have us believe. The empirical method or senses are just variations of the actual word that should be used to define empiricism, which is the foundation. And we've actually listed that foundation. Rationality is unfounded, claiming to be an accepted theory by habituation of our affirmations towards a specific theory. Philosophy, phi, is the ability to make true statements about life, whereas science is the claimants about life. So obviously the ability to state something or claim something are two entirely different things. In fact, they are completely oppositions, which is more than the difference. Where science finds something to be true, it is no longer science, but rather what philosophy has already found a truth. So where science finds something to be true, it is no longer science, but rather what philosophy has already found it as truth. Empirical philosophy is the only philosophy. We use the foundation of a being to be utilized as its faculties. Through these faculties, we can only realize that which is founded upon that very same foundation. Finally, the natural universe is one that was created and life exists within it. A physical universe has been randomly hallucinated, and life does not actually exist, but merely is a collection of atoms that decay. It's interesting how the natural universe makes statements about our existence. If the latter were correct, my paper would simply be a collection of meaningless words upon which no meaning is possible. I wonder, as a reader, or in this case, listener, do you think it would be possible for you to actually listen and comprehend this if we were in a physical universe? Delusional is defined as a false belief or lesser being. The physical universe qualifies easily as delusional. In fact, the believer in a theory of a physical universe is quite simply insane. The word delusional applies to those whom believe in it and still doubt the theory. However, a firm theorist of physics is wholly insane. The physical universe is similar to the external Genesis. However, the objectified comes from a responsible source called the existential, or rather subjective, being. The ability to subjectify means you have complete certainty you exist. A physical universe states you do not exist, and yet you can by now see differences among the opposition of the natural and the physical universe. So that's everything for this video that pertains to the paper. Now I will discuss some implications to the world. When I, as a knowing, non-believing, certain being, understand my reality and am called delusional, you can understand why I've continually stressed the difference between what is delusional and what is sane. Because in my own experiences, my own wisdom that I've gained, the scientific mind is highly evil and inherently does not understand that it is evil. So we will often see liberals in the US who are protesting for whatever rights it may be, and you see Antifa or something like that. This is an example of highly delusional, insane beings who have chosen to opposition themselves and live on a planet where they will die. And it is no surprise that they believe that they are doing something right. This, we call it a switch. It is the path to death. It is beyond science. It is beyond physics. It's beyond the invisible. It's the unseen. I haven't established what that is in this video, so I will not get into it too much. But there's essentially one position or one category beyond science, and it is art. Art is in the mind of the delusional mind, in the mind of the delusional, the least of a problem. Whereas art, the mind of the artist, is so beyond delusional and insane. We would call them mute. It's about not actually having a self whatsoever. Whereas opposed to destroying yourself, you are dead to self. So there's a difference in the path. There's dissension towards destruction, and then there's recension, which is death. There's ascension towards creation, and there's transcendence towards being. These 4 steps are the steps one takes to die. From transcendence to descendance to rescendance. When they return, they move through ascendance back to transcendence, making essentially 5 moves. Sometimes they begin to ascend and then descend again. It's really independent here. It's each individual is doing their own thing. The reason why I get into that, because this really, what I'm saying here is not my own creation, but rather just how things are. At least that's the goal. Now, with that in mind, how does this paper and this information in this video change the world? Well, each individual will change in and of themselves. No group theory will work. So, if you're watching this and you've heard the whole video and somewhat understand or understand completely, well, if you understand completely, then you are already in the same position and already on the path back to transcendence. But if you somewhat understand, then you're probably ascending. If you believe you do not understand very much, you are descending. And if you deny this paper completely, then you are rescinding. You can see how it's in the mind of the switched, which is recension, that it is completely the other way. Where at least a scientist is somewhere in between. Yeah. What a world. Anyways, this was the James School of Genesis. Thank you for watching.